Do you ever think about the children in your state who are currently in foster care? Here in Florida, there are about 19,000 children living in foster care. That's a lot of kids. And in that group, there are about 500 children who have no identified families. Can you imagine how scary and lonely that must be? To be a child with no family at all, and only the government to try to take care of you and keep you safe. There are a lot of different situations that can lead to that, but whatever happened, it's no fault of the child. They didn't ask to be born into a family of addicts, or criminals, or abusers, or maybe just someone who didn't want them. They're already starting off life with a disadvantage. It's not fair. My guest today, Samantha, learned about the foster care system kind of by surprise. She and her husband, Jeremy, were living their lives, and they had 3 young children of their own, which kept them pretty busy. They were a happy family. They didn't plan to suddenly be dealing with the foster care system, or more specifically, a process called family placement. And it all started with an unexpected phone call about a baby. Real people in unreal situations.
There is a girl hanging by her broken leg from the telephone wire.
And I called 911 and I said, I found a baby.
I turned around. I see a gun pointed at me close enough I could touch it.
She would hold our heads underwater all the time.
He levels the gun, pulls the trigger, and I go down.
Her eyes were full of tears. She didn't want to leave us.
My hair catches on fire.
I swear to God, this image is burned in my head for the rest of my life.
I'm Scott Johnson, and this is What Was That Like? Can you give us a quick summary of Hannah? I understand she's your sister-in-law, your husband's sister.
Yes, yeah. Hannah is my husband's younger sister. They were raised in the same household and have the same mother, but different fathers. Hannah, growing up, was always kind of like a little bit of a bad child. She is kind of deceivious and was prone to lying for just kind of silly things. But as she got into high school and into her teenage years, she definitely started to get into substance abuse, and the lying kind of veered more towards negative and destructive behaviors. So she got into a lot of trouble with school, was never able to get her license or anything like that. And so that was kind of just really something that she struggled with, is substances from an early age.
I know a lot of teens go through periods like that, but you kind of hope they mature out of it, but it sounds like it kind of became a life trend.
Yeah, it never seemed to phase out at any point. Yeah, it definitely, if anything, just continued to get worse. And it was kind of one of those difficult things where you see somebody, continuing to make poor choices and go down a path that is not going to lead to anything super positive.
When all this started, your oldest was in kindergarten. Can you just describe who was your family at that time?
So me and my husband, Jeremy, we have 3 children. Our oldest, Jamie, is 5 at the time. We have a younger daughter who is 3, Maya, and then we have a youngest, Silas, who just turned 1.
3 little kids.
Yeah, 3 little ones.
And this was in the spring, and you were at a kindergarten graduation. Can you tell us what happened that day?
We were actually all standing out in line out front of my son's elementary school waiting to get into a kindergarten graduation, which we were all excited about. My dad was there with us, and I got a phone call from an unknown number, and I actually don't usually answer those, but I was in a good mood for whatever reason, just picked it up, and it was Hannah, my sister-in-law, and she was calling to ask if we would consider taking in her 5-month-old daughter while she went to detox and rehab. Her daughter, Ariana, had ended up in the care of the state and she needed somewhere to go. They had a state meeting and decided that Jeremy and I would be the best choice in the family without having to move on towards out of family care.
I know you guys are very family oriented, but what was that discussion like between you and Jeremy? Did you guys just immediately decide to do it?
I mean, yes, I think as the people we are, we both really love children and are very caring. So of course, like, regardless, there was a baby who needed a place to live. Of course, yeah, we'll take her. I mean, we don't even have a vehicle that can accommodate an entire family that large. But yeah, we just felt like, of course, if there's a baby in need in its family, regardless of what's going on.
Yeah, I would think anyone who knows about a need like that with a baby would want to help in some way. And in this case, especially because it's family.
Right. Yeah. Like, you have a niece who has nowhere to live.
What are the considerations you had to think about in taking, because you already had one baby in the family.
Mm-hmm.
What did you have to consider in making this decision?
I remember the biggest things was one, the vehicle, because we only had a 5-seater vehicle. So then if we were to take on another child, we would have to take 2 vehicles everywhere we went, which is difficult in itself. Also with childcare, that was really a consideration. We had our 3 kids in with a nanny and she had 2 of her own children as well. And I don't know many childcare people who you can just spring on like, hey, do you have room for an extra infant? Like that's a lot to take on. And so that was a really big thing that we had to consider. But ultimately it was just a baby who needed somewhere to go. So how do you say no to that?
Yeah, I know. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
So what was the process? You told Hannah yes verbally on the phone. And what happened next?
On the phone, I was like, yeah, I suppose so. Exactly. How do you say no to that? She said that a caseworker would probably be in touch within the next day or so to kind of give us more information. And so, yeah, we had those just kind of questions over that night. The next morning, I was actually had just gotten into work, logged in. So it was just after 8:00 and I got a phone call from that caseworker and things moved very fast. She confirmed that we were willing to confirm that we actually, had a home to live in with enough space. And then she asked like basic background information and questions. She collected our personal information. So they ran background checks on us and did things. And then she told me that inspector would be by the house in 2 hours to come check the home to see if it would qualify for a state home. And so, yeah, that was crazy. So then my husband, he got off work and ran home to clean up. Not that we were super concerned about it, but it's a little nerve-wracking having a state inspector come into your house when you have 3 young kids and you just left the morning not planning on anyone walking in.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one thing if family decides to come over, no big deal. But this is actually an inspection.
Yeah. And we didn't really even know what they were looking for. We definitely did not have a bed or anything for Ariana or any like extra items, but they went ahead, they did the inspection. It was probably just before noon. I got a second call from the caseworker and it's basically saying like, cool, everything's cleared off. When can you come pick her up?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
This is like a whirlwind of activity. Less than 24 hours earlier, none of this was even thought of.
No, we didn't even know anything about it.
So you passed the inspection, obviously. It seems like they're trying to kind of fast track, rush this through. Did you get that impression? Like, how thorough was the inspection?
Well, so the inspection was mostly them just checking to make sure that it's generally general cleanliness of the home. There's no like infestations. There's no like animal urine or feces in the home. There's running water and functional toilets and a fridge that is stocked with food is really what they check for. Like bottom line is what they need. But yeah, it was very rushed because Ariana had actually been in a state nursery for 3 days at that point. So they were desperate to find a home for her to go into.
So you get a phone call saying, okay, when can you come and pick up the baby? What do you do?
I mean, I had to finish up what I was doing there at work as quickly as I could. And I rushed home and met with my husband. And we got down to one car and drove downtown to the Department of Youth and Families. And we walked in and they just handed me a baby. Really, they're like, you're here for Ariana? And we're like, yeah, okay. So I have this little baby in my arms, and they had a diaper bag that they gave us. And then we had to give them our IDs, signed like 2 different things. There was like a little real quick papers, and they're like, all right, someone will be in touch in a few days. Thanks. I had to pause and ask them for a car seat. I was like, do you have a car seat for her? I don't have one, or didn't bring it. I'm sure if you were planning on picking up a child in a foster situation or something like that, maybe that was something you'd have planned for, but we didn't have anything.
For an infant, you had a 1-year-old. Would they use the same kind of car seat, or is there a different one?
They did. Yeah. Yeah. So the 2 infant car seats, the ones you can like pull out of the car and tote around.
And you said they gave you a diaper bag. Were there any supplies? Did you have anything like diapers or anything?
The diaper bag had about 5 or 6 diapers in there. It had like a pack of wipes that had been used like once or twice. It had a white onesie in there with like a basic like baby blanket, a bottle, and a can of formula that was partially used. But they told me, they're like, there's this formula, but we think this is upsetting her stomach. We haven't been able to figure out what works best for her, but this is what we've been feeding her. That was it.
I'm just hearing you tell this, I'm feeling overwhelmed because it's just happened so quickly. I mean, a lot of people might think, should we foster? And you might have weeks or months of conversations and research and preparation and everything. And here you are the next day.
Yeah.
With a new baby.
It's 3:00. We were driving home back to our apartment with Ariana in the car. We were just kind of like mind blown. What just happened?
You had mentioned that when you got back home, you'd noticed that Ariana was coughing a lot and you suspected some kind of illness. Did they give you any kind of medical history on that?
We did not. We were told that she was seen by a state physician, but that was it, really. But yeah, she had a very concerning, like it was an alarming cough, very like hoarse and like wet sounding. And it would go in fits. And to think about it, she was a very small baby at this time. She was 5 months old, probably about the size of like a 3-month-old baby at the time. And so very small and frail and just these awful coughing fits. And she, her face would turn all bright red. So we actually ended up taking her into that urgent care that night. We just didn't know what was going on. Wanted to check all the babies.
And it's not like you guys are brand new parents. You've been through this a few times. Kids get sick.
Yeah.
You weren't just panicking like, what do we do? You were experienced. So that was good. Let's back up a little bit. How did little Ariana end up in the custody of the state?
The following week, when we actually were assigned a state caseworker, she came over to our house to introduce herself and do what we would learn was a regular monthly meeting with her, where she would come in and do a home inspection, give us any new information on the case, ask us all this information about Ariana, how she was doing. And it was really just time to pass information back and forth. So what she told us was that Hannah and her husband Lance, Ariana's parents, they had been living in like an RV trailer and had been on the run from Idaho police for the last few months. Lance had some previous convictions and issues with the law over in Idaho or in Washington state, just over the border. They had moved over here shortly after they had Ariana. They had previously been sober, and sobriety was actually a very important thing in their life from the last time I had seen them. they had started using again and had really quickly gone down a negative path, and we're just getting deeper and deeper.
So when they went from Idaho to Washington, that was, I assume, that was outside of the guidelines of his parole.
Yes, that broke his parole. And that's why he was on the run, is because he was in Washington versus Idaho.
Where were they living?
They were living on some family's property in this RV.
Did the family know that they were avoiding police detection? Or do you know if they...
I don't know.
That's not something you tell people, I guess, when you're looking for a place to stay, I guess.
Right. It's all family, and a lot of it was on Lance's family, so I would assume they would have to be somewhat informed, but I don't know what led to those decisions and how it got to that point. But I think ultimately came down to Hannah and Lance having a baby and nowhere to live, and his family stepping in to just provide a roof over their head. And
you said they were actually dealing in drugs in some way while they were there?
Yes. In the RV itself, there was production or cooking of various drugs. I don't know very much about illegal substances or drugs or anything really.
I don't either, except I'm picturing the RV from Breaking Bad where they were cooking meth inside, you know?
Yeah. I'm probably not nearly that sophisticated. Actually, guaranteed not nearly that sophisticated. But yeah, definitely was the manufacturing of drugs there. And the use of them in a very small, confined space.
I don't know much about it either, but I know in that production I saw them always wearing gas masks, you know, to protect their lungs from breathing in that stuff. And you've got a 5-month-old baby living in that environment. It's no wonder she came to you with a bad cough.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And there was no real reason for the cough other than just the exposure.
So what happened with them?
Lance had stolen a truck or in a vehicle, and while under the influence was driving and hit like a telephone pole while driving in the vehicle, disabling the vehicle. This was all told by witnesses who saw this happen. They were in a house across the street, and so they saw him hit this pole, disable the truck. He got out. They said he looked kind of confused, paused for a second, reached back into the vehicle and pulled out the infant carrier with Ariana in it. And then he began to run away from the scene. Then as he's gone a few yards, stopped again. They said he paused there for a while, and then he set the carrier down, baby carrier there on the side of the road, and then he took off and ran. And so the witnesses, they were kind of shocked by this whole scene, had already been on the phone with authorities reporting what they were seeing. Once they were sure, like they couldn't see Lance anymore and sure was safe, they went out and retrieved the baby and the baby carrier, and they held on to her until the police came, or the authorities, and took Ariana away. But at that point, no one knew who Ariana was. So she was just an unknown baby in the state care for 3 days. Hannah was kind of MIA at this time. No one really knew where she was or what was going on. And Hannah's grandmother got concerned enough in realizing that no one knew where Ariana was that she called the police. And then somehow they were able to track Hannah down, and then they pulled her into the office and confirmed identity. And that's when they had that meeting where they were deciding, well, obviously we need to decide temporary care for the child. Hannah was also under the influence in the meeting, admittedly so as well. So there was that immediate need to place the child with somebody. Because she was in, it's called the Vanessa Behan Crisis Nursery, which is just like a volunteer-led program in our town. And it's a wonderful program, but they have huge numbers of infants that come through at all different stages of neglect and abuse and health ranges. And I mean, these babies are just kind of cared for by the volunteers there and passed around until they can figure out what to do.
to me, it's just astounding to be in that kind of a mindset of Hannah, where your husband's gone, don't know where he is. Your baby is gone, missing for 3 days. And it's someone else that calls the police to find out where the baby is, rather than her own mother.
I have to imagine there's definitely got to be like shame and guilt in that. Like, you don't want to call and be like, hey, my husband left my baby on the side of the road. Do you know where she is? But I would definitely think the use of the drugs at the time and the level of intoxication played super heavily into it. So, I mean, neither one of them, I would believe, were thinking clearly or were straight minded.
So Lance is gone. He's kind of out of the picture, on the run for 3 months. Hannah's going into rehab, and that's when you got that phone call.
Yeah. Well, so the original pitch, she was going to go into detox first and then go to an inpatient rehab. But going through that whole process, she has to go through and get admitted into these places and accepted, and also get her insurance to cover them. And there's a lot of steps that the individual has to do on their own, that when you're someone who's in the throes of addiction, you're not as put together to necessarily get those things done in a timely manner. So yeah, the idea was she was going to go straight into those things, but it did take a few months before she got any kind of treatment. And then at that point, it started with outpatient.
How much of that backstory did she tell you when she first called? Did you know any of that?
None. Nothing.
Did you wonder why, when she told you Ariana's been in state custody for 3 days, you must have wondered, okay, what's the story there? Or did she even tell you that?
Well, no, we didn't know how long she had been in the state custody. So all of this happened. We got the call on a Wednesday. And on Monday, Hannah's grandma and my husband's grandma, she had sent Jeremy a text or something saying that they didn't know where Ariana was. But we didn't have much contact with that side of the family just because of the lifestyle choices and things. We had a young family of our own, so we had pretty clear boundaries there. So we knew kind of something was going on, but had no idea that it was anything as serious as it really was.
So now you have another little human living in your home.
Yeah.
Obviously, you wanted to keep Ariana in a safe, nurturing environment while Hannah was detoxing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just wondering about the stress that this added to your family. Like visitation. Was Hannah allowed to come and see the baby sometimes?
Yes. So visitations were allowed. That was something that got set up almost immediately. That's one of the first things the state does coordinate with the parents, because it is their parental right to have, visitations and see their child. That does not come to our house or anything like that. We actually aren't allowed to share where our location with Hannah and Lance, more of just kind of a protection thing for the child. So what the state does is there's these different facilities around town that are set up specifically to hold and host visitations between parents and children in these families that are split up. So it does create like a neutral zone where both parties can come. And depending on the level of monitoring that is necessary, they have staff there that can facilitate different parts. So there is the supervised visits, there's monitors visits, and then there's just observed visits as well, depending on the level the state needs to be involved in that. The state would send a driver out to pick up Ariana wherever we happen to be at that given time. They would come pick her up, take her to the visitation, and then bring her back to us wherever we happen to be.
So you really didn't have direct interaction with Hannah during that at all then?
None. No, hadn't seen her.
How was Ariana's health after that initial, when you thought she was kind of sick with a cough? Did that improve?
It did. It took a few months throughout the rest of the summer, really, probably the end of 2017, the summer of 2017. She was back more to a much more healthy infant, and we wouldn't really notice anything different. We had nebulizers and albuterol treatments that we did multiple times a day. And that drastically changed things for her. It's really cute actually to have like a little 6-month-old baby who would get it. She'd like smile and be happy because she could breathe when she did the treatments. You'd think like kids would hate it or like not be cooperative, but she obviously immediately correlated the benefits and she really enjoyed her treatments. So that made a huge difference. But I mean, we kept her in our bedroom at night, sleeping in her crib there too, because she'd get into coughing fits and we'd get up and she'd be purple because she just would struggle to recover from that coughing to be able to breathe again. And so we'd have to either go like into the bathroom with the steam or go outside with the cold air, something to kind of change the air density to kind of shock our system back into breathing.
This is overseen by Child Protective Services. How closely did they monitor your care of Ariana?
They would come to the house once a month and physically have eyes on the child and the environment. I spoke with the caseworker pretty frequently because Ariana was a ward of the state. So although I was taking care of her and she was in my possession, I had no rights over her. So if we went to the doctor, I had to have permission from the caseworker because they had to sign all medical documents and do all of those other parts. So there was a lot of communication. It's a lot of voicemails back and forth. It's incredibly difficult to get in touch with a caseworker because she's incredibly busy.
Yeah, they're overloaded too, right?
Oh, yeah. She's so overloaded, always like working on a backlog. Sorry, I got this, and this done. Here you go. But I mean, on the day to day, not a whole lot. They can at any time just come by unannounced.
And that's how it should be, really, for the protection of the child.
Oh, of course, yeah.
It's expensive to have a child in your family. You mentioned car seat, but I mean, there's a whole lot of other stuff, food and clothing and diapers. And I mean, diapers can be like another car payment, you know?
Yes, yeah.
But foster parents get paid some kind of a stipend or you get reimbursed for that, right?
Correct. If you were a foster parent, we were not foster parents, though. We were family placement. So as family placement, we didn't qualify for any additional benefits. And Ariana, as a ward of the state, was an independent. Like, we couldn't claim her as a dependent of us because she's a dependent of the state. So she was covered under the state for her health care and her health insurance. And she qualified for WIC, which is Women's, Infants, and Children, which is a program in Washington State where she would get coupons to where we could get formula and baby food and then bigger, like more foods once she got older. But that was really it. Otherwise, it was on us to take care of it.
And that's because you're family. I guess the assumption is that if you're family, you're kind of obligated to take care of another family member. So you get all the supervision and regulations, but it's all at your expense or the majority of it's at your expense.
Correct. Yeah. And I think, like you said, there's that obligation to it, but I think it also goes to prevent families from profiting from caring for each other's children, in a sense. As like, that's a really backwards, twisted way to look at it, but I think the state has to come at it from that point of view, unfortunately. You couldn't have like a family setup where you're like, oh, well, I'll just give my mom custody and then she'll get paid to have the kid.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know some people would think that way. Yeah.
Right.
You mentioned at one time that some family members kind of resented you for being a good parent for Ariana. Where would that come from?
Yeah. So one of the things that normally you would never have to consider when raising a child is like titles. So we're raising an infant who is learning how to speak. She's learning how to make connections. She's learning how to ask for help. Learning like who the people around her are and like those basic bonds in families. So she's also being raised with our children. So they call me and Jeremy mom and dad. And we treat them like our children. Ariana, we wanted to treat her exactly the same as our children because that's such a fragile age and the brain is going through so much development that, I mean, any lack of connection or like trauma that can happen then can really set someone back lifelong. And we'd never want a child to have some kind of complex. I just tried to put myself in a situation where if I was a child growing up in a home surrounded by siblings who could call those adults caring for us mom and dad, but I would be redirected to call them uncle or aunt or some other kind of form of care or title, that would be really confusing, I feel. And so we really, really thought it was important for Ariana's ultimate well-being that she be raised just like she were in any other home. So she grew up calling me mom and Jeremy dad, and our other children were her siblings. And it was really upsetting to some other family members to hear Ariana call us mom and dad. And they didn't understand the reasoning behind it and felt it was more of us just being overstepping bounds versus caring about the long-term effects of the child. So yeah, we had an incident where family had come over. Hannah's family came over for dinner, and Ariana really was at the very, like, just started speaking. So she could say like mama or dada or like hi, those kinds of things. And they were holding on to her, and I walked by, and so she said mama and like reached out to me, and I took her, and they were like, oh no, Auntie Sam. And I then corrected them. I was like, no, I'm mom for her. Like right now, that's just is her reality. And they left. It was very upsetting. So it's just difficult to think of it from all different perspectives. Because I also agree, like, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I'm not trying to, take Ariana from Hannah or take that title of mom from her. But that is the role that I am playing.
You're the one that stepped in and took the baby when she was asking for it. And, the other, from Ariana's perspective, she's calling you mom, but then she's visited by this other person who she also is supposed to call mom. That had to just add another layer of confusion to it.
There was definitely along the visitation, it was confusing. It was complex because as Ariana aged, her reactions changed. Obviously, she becomes more perceptive. She understands more of what's going on. She realized she's being taken away to something else and then coming back. But it's something that she also knows no one else in the family does. We were always very open about talking about Hannah and Lance, and it was Mama Hannah and Daddy Lance. And we were very honest with the discussion of that they just made poor choices. And so Mommy Hannah has to go and do some work on herself so that she could get into a place where she could take care of her daughter or herself. And that Daddy Lance made really poor choices, and now he's in prison for a few years.
It's the other interesting situation here is that Ariana and your youngest child were pretty close in age. So I'm guessing they probably learned a lot of things at the same time, like, walking, talking, potty training. Is that how that played out?
All of it. Silas and Ariana, they're both 2016 babies, literally 42 weeks apart. So, I mean, it just barely could have been possible for them to be biologically related, but they were very, very close from the beginning. If you've never seen two like infants and toddlers interact with each other like in a genuine way, it is the best joy ever. Like they create their own little language and they play games and communicate and support each other. And just like it's just so heartwarming and wonderful. Like I absolutely loved it. Having two children that young at the same time or having twins, like I would never wish that on anyone. It is literally twice as hard in every possible way. But that relationship and seeing just that bond that happens between the babies is so magical. They really were connected at the hip. We had our bigs. So we had Jamie and Maya, our bigs and our littles. Our Silas and Ariana.
Did it seem like Hannah was making progress in rehab?
Unfortunately, no. She would go in and out of a lot of programs. That first 6 months to a year, she really tried her best to get by with qualifying through outpatient programs and doing meetings and things like that to try and qualify to get, to be sober and meet the state requirements. But yeah, ultimately she did really struggle to finish any individual program.
So you started planning on adopting Ariana. What did that process look like?
Yeah, so November of 2018. So it'd been about 18 months since the case had been opened. And Hannah had at that point failed to finish any program. And so the state went ahead and filed for termination or petitioned the court to terminate parental rights. And they provided us with an adoption attorney. But we had written up an adoption agreement to Hannah and to present to Hannah and Lance, basically stating that we would be taking over custody. It would be open adoptions. And then there was stipulated like visitations throughout that and communications of progress and things as far as that goes with a typical adoption that was all presented to the court. And so this is all in the juvenile court system at this point. And so the state is presenting this to them, saying we want to take this to the state court to actually move forward with filing. And at that point, Hannah and her attorney it kind of just got Hannah into taking it more seriously. At that point, she agreed. She went into an inpatient program. And that just kind of started another process of her going in and out of programs.
It sounds like she was trying. It's not like she doesn't want to lose her child.
No, she didn't.
But the grip of addiction was just too strong, and she'd been that way for too long.
It really was, because when it came down to her like getting kicked out of programs, it was very silly, minuscule things. Like it wasn't even necessarily like that she was just continuing to use. It was her just continuing to disregard house rules repetitively. And they're like, well, if you can't follow the rules, you can't be here.
It almost sounds like self-sabotage.
It is very, very much self-sabotage. I mean, it got one point where she was doing really well. She had actually completed an inpatient program and was called an Isabella house. So it's kind of like a recovery house for moms. It's not a halfway house. They still have all their programs and it's still full care, but she lives there. It's just kind of a little step down. And she was doing very well there and had gotten on track and was getting overnight visitations with Ariana at that point there at that home. She came back one day with a lighter in her pocket and got kicked out because you can't come back into the house with a lighter.
Was she not allowed to even smoke at all, or did that indicate use of cocaine, or what was the lighter, or what was the reason for not having a lighter?
I think they were completely sober. I don't think they weren't allowed to have any lighters on premise. And so like just kind of silly things when it really comes down to it, which is really frustrating on our side because we want to see finality to this. We just want, the constant like up and down, or like maybe are we mom and dad? Are we not mom and dad? Or is this going to be like, are we looking 5 years in the future? Or are we looking like 2 years in the future? And just really trying to find some kind of consistency and witnessing someone just have that self-sabotage and make those silly or seemingly silly mistakes that hold them back is really, really disheartening and really difficult.
This all kind of culminated in the spring of 2020. And of course, that's just as COVID was starting. What happened then?
Spring of 2020. So again, that had been 2 years after the state had initially brought petitioned for termination. Early 2020, the court agreed. They said, okay, I'm sorry, enough is enough. You have yet to, again, complete a full program. We are going ahead and moving this forward to the state court and moving forward with termination. And what that just means is that's just going to start another court proceeding. It doesn't mean anything's final by any means. It just moves at the next step up the ladder. So that was really encouraging for us, just to kind of see that end in sight.
Because how long had you had Ariana?
3 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'd had her for 3 years in our home. She definitely was part of our family, and,
Yeah, that was the family that she knew.
yeah, exactly. That's where we were. And so we were looking forward to going into that season and battling, just starting that next step of the process. And then COVID happened and lockdown. And as many of us know, so the court systems had to close. They had to remove most non-emergent things off of the dockets to try and get priority cases through during those times. So they were trying to go through and really kind of prioritize things. And that went down even so the Department of Youth and Children CPS was doing the same kind of thing, looking through their files, trying to whittle it down to a more manageable caseload within, new health constrictions. And then even with Hannah's inpatient program that she was in, so there were, I don't know how many women were living there at the time, but they had to close their doors, and they were doing some kind of fast tracking of progress. And I don't know if they were just dumping lessons really fast on these ladies or what really was going on. But Hannah was actually able to complete a 6-month program in 4 months prior to that next court date. So then, since they're looking at things that are emergent, and so she did complete a program. So there's no reason we can't bring it to the state court now, because now she's complying and it'll just get denied. So all in all, they decided just to go ahead and give Ariana back to Hannah with some loose oversight.
That just had to be heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was just quick. Over a phone call. It all happened very, one phone call. Hey, this is what's happening. We're going to do this. We're going to have a call in 2 weeks with all the different parties involved, all the different attorneys and workers. And we're going to figure out, a transition back process. It's not healthy to take a child and just all of a sudden pick them up and move them to a different place. Now this is your home. Typically they try to kind of slow you go into it, start with weekend visits and maybe 2 nights, and then it'll be 3 nights, and then it'll be 4 nights. And just so then over a few months, they kind of just gradually start living at that new home more and more. With the constraints of COVID, we couldn't have her leaving and going into an unknown home with unknown people and then coming back over and over and over. So unfortunately, it was just a pick her up, take her.
How did your other children handle that?
It was just heartbreaking, really, for everyone. Especially, like I said, we had been very honest and open with our kids that, bad choices had been made, and that's why we were in this situation. And so they had a loose understanding of responsibility and who was making right choices and what a safe home would be. So they really were upset because they didn't agree. They didn't think she was going to be safe. And they didn't want their sister to go and not see her again, but to go and to, be in a bad environment. It was really, really difficult.
I know you'd mentioned that Jeremy, your husband, feels guilty just because it's his side of the family causing the issues. Was he able to work through that? Because obviously it's not his fault.
No, not at all. But that was a really difficult thing for him to overcome. Even from the beginning of the process. This was so stressful and taxing on us and the whole family, the whole 3 years, as wonderful as it was. And so it was in those difficult times where it would be affecting me and my mental health. And he would be like, I'm just so sorry. He's like, I'm sorry that my sister, made these choices, or, I'm sorry that my family's crazy and is, treating us this way. And he, growing up, like I said, there wasn't a lot of supervision. And so he did a lot of raising of his sister. And so him having that like responsibility over her, and then just to see her grow up and continue to make poor choices, it has been really hard for him to kind of overcome. He had to, accept that wasn't his responsibility.
I can see that now, though, the way you phrase that. It's like he partially raised her, and now it turns out that as her brother, he was a bad parent in some way.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any contact at all with Hannah or Ariana since that day that she left?
We have not. No. And that's probably one of the most difficult parts. Well, gosh, that's a complicated question to even answer. No, we haven't seen her at all. I would love to see her, but that also is incredibly terrifying. Like, I don't know. The last time I saw her, she gave me a hug and kissed me and said, "Bye, mommy. I love you." Like, now, like, I would just be coming into it as a different role, which would be difficult for me at this point, because it's gone. Now it's been 3 years. I think that's a lot more difficult now. Originally, of course, I would have wanted to, and we did want to, and there was supposed to be we actually had a schedule of like video visits that were going to be part of like that transition process. But once Hannah got Ariana back, she cut off all ties. I've been completely blocked from everything since then. She has always just kind of perceived me as a threat to her motherhood, which I understand. Like, I really do understand. I mean,
it does. I can understand it too. I mean, you were starting legal action to take her child into your family.
Yeah, I did. And then I was the better mom for X period of time, which is difficult. I get.
How old is Ariana now?
She is 6.
And what do you know about Hannah? Does she live somewhere local to you?
They do. They are still in the same town, although I'm blocked and haven't had like any direct communication as family, even with like the complex family dynamics. And we have heard things from others. And I do know that there was a long period between 2021 and 2022 where Hannah and Ariana were homeless. They were living in the different shelters around town. And so that's extremely difficult to know. And just, there's nothing you can do about it. Well, I mean, even if you were to call and say something, it's not, you can be homeless and not get your parental rights taken away. Like, that doesn't mean that you don't deserve to have your child. It's just difficult to know when you could provide something more or better. But I mean, gosh, even that's complicated though too, because I don't know. I want the best for them. I want Hannah to succeed, and I want her to be a wonderful mother, but I also want Ariana. So
have you thought about how you would handle it if you just ran into her in public somewhere, like at the grocery store?
I do. I think about it or when I think about it a lot when I'm like driving through town, because I drive through parts of town where I know they probably are or are likely to be. And yeah, I don't know. It just makes me nervous. I don't know if Ariana would recognize me. I don't know what Hannah would do. I mean, Hannah could go from, she could, put a smile on her face and be all happy, or she could like make a scene. I mean, she's kind of unpredictable in that sense, and I don't know where she is in her journey right now.
It would be uncomfortable for everyone, it sounds like.
Yes.
An unexpected encounter, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But a bridge I hope to cross at some point.
Looking back on all that has happened, would you have done anything differently?
No. God, it's so hard to looking back. Like, there was so much pain in all of it and so much just emotion, like the extremes of all the emotions throughout the whole process. And then really the grief of her leaving. That's been so hard to explain. So people will still come by and they're like, oh, didn't you have another one? And I'm like, oh yeah, well, I don't anymore. But no, I don't think I would do anything different. Me and Jeremy have really grown close through this, and our whole family as a whole, we're all very open with each other and vulnerable and very open with our emotions as a family, which is something that we were kind of forced into going through this process. Everything, really just happens for a reason, truly. My faith is really important to me, and I know God has been here through me through all of this and has really helped me and Jeremy grow and given us such a great support group in our community here. And just kind of like a funny thing, dates are funny, like how things line up, or like coincidences. Me and my husband were actually getting baptized at the exact time that Ariana was being born. Exact same time, which is very just kind of interesting thinking back, because without my faith, I don't think I would have had the grace to get through this. It's very easy, or could be very easy, to be extremely bitter and angry about all of this. And I still am at points and in, different aspects of it, but it really had to just be like a selfless love for the child, that doesn't matter what I think of it or what.
Yeah, if Hannah was on track and a good mother and providing a good environment, you would want Ariana to stay with her anyway, right?
Yes. Well, yes, of course. Yeah, that would be great. There's yet proof to that is true, but
it's interesting, the difference between being a traditional foster parent and the terminology, which was new to me, a family placement.
Mm-hmm.
What's your advice for anyone considering fostering a family member?
Fostering a family member. If it's something that could be planned, just knowing going into it how taxing it is on every relationship in the extended family. And it just makes everything super complicated. Roles are challenged in so many unique ways that you don't consider until you're in that position. But of course, if anyone in a family ever needed to care for another family member, if you had the means, 100% do it. Again, you have to have the child's interest at heart. Don't do it for the parent. You can't do it only if the parent does X, Y, and Z. Like, it has to just truly be unconditional, because you can't guarantee, what a person is going to do and the choices they're going to make. And if anything, they're likely going to disappoint you. And so if you went into it really only planning for it to be temporary and specifically looking for an insight, that could be really, really difficult. Where we did go into it originally completely just as a temporary thing, but you see as it goes on that there's so much more to it.
There is a possibility that Hannah might hear this podcast. What would you like to say to her?
Oh gosh, there's so much love for Hannah in the family, and no matter how many mistakes you make, or all the bad choices that you've had, if just come humbly to people, and we'll accept you for who you are. Gosh, we would love to be supportive and be able to have a relationship.
Yeah, you guys live close enough. You could, if you got along, you could have play dates with your kids and all that stuff.
Yeah, we could. All of my kids still talk about her. I think Ariana, out of all of this, is like just a shining star. She, from the beginning, with how sick she was and like her physical ailments, she always defied all the odds. She got better quicker than anyone ever thought. All of her like developmental delays, she crushed her PT and OT so quickly, and she was always able to like overcome everything that you put in front of her. And she's such a strong-willed child. She knows what she wants. She, has a lot of her mother in her, and, she is unique and she's not apologetic for who she is. And I think that just for her as a person, I think she has a great future coming, and I am thankful that we were at least able to be there in those first formative years to really help her have a better future and healthy relationships and bonds with those.
The show notes for this episode can be seen at whatwasthatlike.com/143, and you can see some family pictures there, as well as the full transcript of this episode. Earlier this week, I asked in the Facebook group if anyone has been involved with foster care, either as a foster parent or being in foster care yourself. If you're not in there already, I'd love to hear your comments on that too. You can join for free at whatwasthatlike.com/Facebook. I've got to tell you about an experience that I had recently that was pretty amazing. Earlier this month, I made a quick trip to New York City to meet with my ad agency, Glassbox Media, and I also met up with some podcaster friends. But on the day I arrived, which was a Tuesday, I had that afternoon free, so I decided to try something. As a backdrop to this, something you need to know about me is that I have a big heart for young people. More specifically, those who are part of the LGBTQ community. They often have a really hard time, and I see that happening, especially here in Florida, and I just hate that. And what really gets me is when they decide to work up the courage to come out to their parents, and they end up being rejected by their mom or their dad, or both. Or they even get kicked out of the house. As a dad, I cannot imagine ever doing that to my kids, no matter what they told me. But this happens all the time. So here's what I did in New York City on a Tuesday afternoon. I went to Walgreens and got a poster board and a big Sharpie marker. I folded the poster board in half so it was a little easier to carry, and on each side I wrote in big letters, "Free Dad Hugs." Then I took an Uber down to the lower part of Manhattan to Washington Square Park. This is a huge outdoor area in Greenwich Village, and it's a place where hundreds of people congregate just to hang out and enjoy the day. And it was a beautiful sunny afternoon. And to be honest, I was a little nervous because I really didn't know what to expect or how this would be perceived. I mean, I'm just a guy walking around holding this sign. How would people react to that? I for sure wasn't going to approach anyone to hug them. They would need to see the sign and approach me. So I got out of the Uber, I held my Free Dad Hugs sign, and started walking around the park. I hadn't taken 10 steps when I heard a young man call out, "Hey, I want a free dad hug." And he had a friend with him, so 2 hugs right off the bat. And I thought, man, this is really happening. Kept walking, and more people kept coming up to me for a hug. It was absolutely amazing. Sometimes they'd be a little hesitant, but I'd have my arms out ready for them, and they would just come right in. I asked them if they were doing okay, and I told them they are awesome, and that I hoped that they would have a great afternoon. And it was clear with some of these young people, some were gay, some were non-binary, it didn't really matter. They were just starving for someone to offer them a little bit of affection. I didn't keep track, but I was there for about an hour, and I guess I probably hugged about 50 people that afternoon. It was an incredible experience. I'm going back to New York this fall sometime, and you can bet I'm going to be back at that park with another sign. Now, for those of you who like to hear the stories with 911 calls, the newest raw audio episode is now live. This is raw audio 33. So now you have 33 episodes to binge when you sign up to support the show. And you get the regular What Was That Like episodes ad-free. In raw audio 33, you'll hear a man calling 911 because his house is on fire and he's inside.
I have a fire in my house.
There's a fire in your house?
Yes, there is.
Okay, can you get out of the house?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, where are you located at in the house?
In my bedroom.
A young man calls 911 to turn himself in.
What's the emergency there?
I'd rather not say.
Okay, well, if you're calling 911, it's my job to find out. So I need to know what the emergency is.
I think it's murder.
What makes you think that?
Because I stabbed someone.
And an elderly man calls 911 because he can't leave his house and he doesn't have any food.
I like one fresh cabbage, avocado, 2 bananas, and 3 Pepsis.
What kind of Pepsi? Like,
I don't know diet stuff.
No, I mean 2 liters or
the big bottle, whatever that is.
And you want 3 of that?
3 of those.
You can hear those calls and what happened along with all the other raw audio episodes by signing up at whatwasthatlike.com/plus and use the promo code PLUS to try it out for free. Or if you're an Apple listener, just click on Try Free at the top of the episode list. Graphics for this episode were created by Bob Bretz. Full episode transcription was created by James Lai. Hey, you know what time it is? It's listener story time. We have a listener story at the end of every episode, and if you have a story, we'd love to hear it. Anything that's interesting that happened to you that you can tell in about 5 to 10 minutes, just record it on your phone and email it to me at scott@whatwasthatlike.com. I know you have a story like that because everyone does, and we want to hear it. In this one, a listener talks about what happened the night before her wedding day. Stay safe, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Hi, Scott. First, I want to tell you I love your podcast. I went on maternity leave last January, and during nap time, I would binge all of your episodes. I learned of your podcast from This Is Actually Happening, and I am so glad that I did. I love the listener tales, and I just thought I'd never have anything to contribute, but then I remembered the night before my wedding, and it was quite a surprise for this type A personality girl. So let me just start by saying I'm a very organized person in my regular life. So you can imagine that leading up to my wedding day, I was pretty on top of every little detail and trying to get ahead of anything that I could possibly foresee happening. It was a very normal night before the wedding. We had our rehearsal dinner at a local restaurant with just a few of our closest friends and family members. Dinner ended around 9, and I was determined to get back to my room, shower, hop into bed as soon as possible. I was obviously so excited for the following day and worried that I would not be able to sleep because of it. So I just wanted to get to bed as early as possible so that I could catch as many hours of sleep as I could. Following tradition, the groom doesn't generally see the bride before the day of their wedding. So my now husband booked a separate room for the night before our wedding. The room I was going to be staying in was also connected to the presidential suite, which we also booked. So you know when you're in a hotel room with adjoining rooms, there's a door between them, just like that. So we booked it this way so that in the morning I could get ready in there with my girls and also have all of my getting ready items close by, jewelry, makeup, all that stuff. When we got home from the restaurant, I kissed my family goodnight, already excited to see him in the morning, and I headed up to my room. So I showered, I blew dry my hair, and headed into bed. I climbed into the clean white sheets, already starting to sleepily think of my beautiful wedding day in just a few hours. However, I noticed a dim light coming through under the adjoining door into the presidential suite, and I like to sleep in total darkness, so this definitely was going to be keeping me up. And I did not want that. So I got out of bed, I went through the adjoining door to the presidential suite, and slam. The door literally slammed behind me. I was not super concerned because, like I said, I booked both rooms, so obviously the door must be able to work both ways. I was wrong. It is locked from the inside of the presidential suite. So now here I am, trapped in the presidential suite on the night before my wedding. And if that's where the story ended, you could definitely sympathize that that's a pretty crappy situation. But I am going to make it just one level worse, because the truth was that I was going to go to sleep naked. Meaning I had left the comfort of my room to go into the presidential suite to turn off that one light, and had gotten trapped in there completely naked and alone. I did not have my phone on me or my Apple Watch, so I could not call anyone. Immediately, my mind is reeling, and I am trying to calm myself down to think about how am I going to get out of this situation. I say this is a hotel room. There absolutely has to be a phone in this room. And to my great relief, there was, just on the other side of the room. So I sprint over to the phone, looking to call the front desk and ask for them to send someone up to rescue me. I pick up the receiver and nothing. There is no ringtone. There is no busy tone. There is nothing. I check the back of the phone. It is plugged in. I press a few numbers. It's just not working. Great. I remember that one of our groomsmen and his girlfriend booked the opposite adjoining room to the presidential suite. And even though I knew in my heart that he and his girlfriend were absolutely downstairs with my fiance drinking at the bar, I started banging on their door, hoping for one of them to come to my rescue. But same as with the phone, I was met with nothing but silence. So now the panic is truly starting to set in. My mind is racing, and I just keep saying to myself, this cannot be happening the night before my wedding. This absolutely cannot be happening. But I quickly snapped myself out of it and realized I absolutely could not just let this happen. I had to get back into my room. And in order to do so, I would have to leave this room, even though, again, I am completely naked. I started to look around the room. The presidential suite is much more like an office space with just a few couches and tables and a mini bar. It did have a closet though, and I know that hotel rooms usually keep a few extra blankets inside of them, right? So I look inside, and unbelievably, I find a nice, huge, cushy blanket. I wrap it around myself and I start to think of a plan. What exactly am I going to do? Am I going to go down to the lobby wrapped in a blanket? Then I recalled that when I stepped out of the hotel elevator earlier that day, I saw that there was a decorative table in the elevator hallway with a phone on top of it. So that was my plan. I was going to exit the room, call for help, and I wedged a water bottle in the door because the last thing I needed was to get locked out of the presidential suite and stuck in the hallway with nothing but a blanket. So I ran to the table. To my relief, I found it, and I didn't make it up. There really was a phone on top of a table. I picked up the receiver, and nothing. Again, the phone was plugged into the wall, and it was not working. How could this be happening again? Now I am truly in full panic. I am all out of ideas, and my only possible next step would be to make the humiliating trip from my floor to the lobby in a literal hotel blanket and nothing else, and ask them to open my door for me. Mere seconds after my defeat in realizing the phone did not work, tears literally streaming down my face, mourning the sleep I will not be getting, and already embarrassed by what I will have to do next, I hear ding, and the elevator doors open. Our groomsman, Anthony, exited the elevator. His expression was first confused and then immediately concerned, because why would he be finding his best friend's fiance in such an erratic state in the hallway of a hotel? I grabbed him and I told him what happened, and he immediately ran back downstairs to get our card and let me back into my room. I was so thankful that he showed up when he did, and I still honestly can't believe that any of that happened, or that he was there to rescue me, thankfully, at that exact moment. What's even funnier is that the chaos did not end there. I woke up in the morning of our wedding day, and all of my girls are in the room, and my mother-in-law show up, and my mom shows up, and the bellhop is in there, and, you know, he's removing all of the dresses from the bellhop, whatever that thing is that they carry. And I asked my mom, I was like, I see your dress. Where is my dress? And she nearly fainted when she realized that it's the one thing that she left at home. So my dad came to the rescue and drove all the way home to get it and back to the hotel. Later on, we had another lockout faux pas when the photographer took pictures in my room and then, like I did, got locked in the presidential suite. This time I had my key to get back into the hotel room, so I exited the presidential suite. I walked around to the hotel room. I swiped my card and beep, it was being declined. I called down to client services. They send up a master key and beep again. The master key was being declined. At this point, I'm just laughing because I'm like, this has got to be some sort of sick joke that somebody is playing on me. They literally had to call an engineer to come upstairs to let me back into my room. Which, by the way, was vitally important because my wedding dress was in there, my wedding shoes, the jewelry, everything was in there. Thankfully, though, that was the end of all of the unplanned craziness. My then fiance and now husband went on to get married, and it was without question the best day ever. I will never forget a moment of that day, including the chaos leading up to it, and I cherish it. I got to marry my best friend, surrounded by family and friends, and we danced the night away and had the best music and the best food. We have now been happily married for 4 years, almost 4 years. We have a beautiful 1-year-old and a perfect little dog. Now all we do is look back and laugh at the uniqueness of our day and remember it very fondly. So just want to say thank you, Scott, for taking the time to listen to my story. And to the brides and grooms out there planning a wedding, just remember you can only plan so much, and to go with the flow. It always, always works itself out in the end.